Welcome to The Calm Artist, and today I want to show you how you can make your own blue marbled polymer clay earrings using our DIY clay kit in the Coastal color palette. So you're going to start off by chopping up some pure white polymer clay. You want to work on a tile or a cold smooth surface, and you can just use a knife, or if you have a clay cutter you can use that too. So I'm going to cut these into tiny little pieces. The thing is that the clay keeps sticking to each other as soon as you cut down again, so you just need to make sure you separate them into tiny little pieces once again, and they will clump together, but separate them as much as you can. You can then move that white clay aside, and you could do the same thing with the light blue clay, chopping it up into tiny pieces. You'll then start mixing in the light blue clay pieces in with the white, still making sure that the clumps are separated though. Alright, we then want to get a piece of parchment paper, and you want to put on gloves for this next step because you will get your hands full of paint. And then going to move the clay onto the parchment paper or baking paper, just separating those clumps once again. I then have blue acrylic paint. It's nothing special, just plain old paint. And I'm just going to drizzle a bit over the top of this. You're then going to want to start mixing everything together, making sure all sides are covered. And then you want to start clumping all the clay pieces together. Now, normally we would let this dry before we clump it together, and then we'll use liquid clay to bind it all together. But if you don't have liquid clay, because we're trying to make this as simple as possible, you're just going to combine it now while the paint is still wet and wait for the outside to dry. So I'm just putting it into like a longish square shape, or rectangle shape I should say. Right, and just leave it aside to dry for now. In the meantime, I'm going to flatten out some light blue clay. You can also just use plain white. This is just going to be a base for the back of the earrings. You want to flatten it out using the roller provided till it's about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. Once the outside of your blue clay pieces have dried, you can then use a sharp knife to cut the edge off. And I'll give you a closer look of what it looks like inside now. So it's a pretty blue marble effect. Now keep in mind that the inside is still wet, so it will smudge a bit. So you just need to cut out thin little slices of this, trying not to smudge that blue too much that's on the inside. And then you can start sticking those slices onto the blue clay piece that's a base for the earrings. Just right next to each other. We will roll over it to flatten everything out in a bit. So don't worry about all those awkward gaps between the pieces. So I decided that I smudged those pieces way too much, so I'm just going to remove them and replace them. Alright, once I've cleaned up my area, I'm then going to use the rolling pin provided to flatten everything out again. Now keep in mind that I do need to keep wiping my rolling pin because that clay is still wet with the blue paint. See how it's smudging everywhere, but at the end it still looks really pretty, so I'm not too worried about it. I was a bit impatient, I didn't want to wait for it to dry completely, but I really like the look of this anyways. So just rolling everything out so it's nice and flat. The goal is to get it to about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. It is okay if it is a bit thicker though. You're then going to use the clay cutters provided to cut out any shapes you want to do. So I'm going to cut out a few large ones and a few small ones, and then in a second you'll see what designs I'm going to make. There are so many designs that you can make with these earrings, and the kits do come with a lot of inspiration for shapes that you can do. So I want to do little hoops. So I've just used a smaller clay cutter to cut out little circles in the bigger clay pieces. I'm going to use those ones that I cut out as like the top part of that earring. And for these ones, I want to make little moon shapes. So again, I'm using a smaller clay cutter to cut out half a circle on the edge of these larger circles. So if you don't have a drill, you'll need to use the bamboo stick provided to put little holes in the earrings where the earring bits need to go to join them. Again, if you have a drill, you can do this step after it's dried in the oven. If you don't have a drill, make sure to do this step before you dry your clay in the oven. Bake your clay in the oven at about 120 degrees Celsius for 20 to 30 minutes. Make sure it doesn't burn because it will go brown. Take it out the oven and leave it to completely cool before you work with it again. Once it's completely cool, you're going to use your little piece of sandpaper to buff out any rough edges and to make the clay smooth on the sides. You can then start attaching the earring pieces together using your jewelry pliers and the jump rings. And you can also attach your shepherd hooks, which are the hooks that actually go through your ears. And make sure that the shepherd hooks are facing in separate and opposite directions. That way both of them are facing outwards instead of having like 2 earrings for the left ear. And there you go, your finished blue marble earring pieces. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to check us out on Instagram, give us a follow on Facebook as well as on YouTube. We have more tutorials coming soon. Thank you, bye.